Hello there everybody and welcome to the second in the series of ghost story videos. Hopefully by now you've watched the first one. If not, maybe have a little look now, in which I will tell you a ghost story and then there's some reading comprehension, some discussion about some of the elements of the language and the phrasing and the plot and the story and how it progresses that make it quite successful, hopefully. Today I'm going to be giving you 3 basic plots that you can work on and adapt and make your own to make a really simple ghost story. And it might be that you can suddenly think of a ghost story you've read by another author, or even one that you've seen on TV or film, that basically comes down to that's the plot that I watched then. Because most ghost stories are quite simple. One of the biggest mistakes kids sometimes make is trying to overcomplicate them and say, there's going to be a ghost there and he's going to jump out from here and then they'll go there and there'll be a zombie and they'll be chased. And actually, whilst it sounds like a good idea in your head, when it translates to paper, it really doesn't work out very well. The reader's just a bit like, this is just a list of things. So, with these plot lines, you should be able to find some quite basic success, even if you're not going to write a really long ghost story, but in fact, if you're just going to practice thinking one through for how you'd actually tell it aloud around a campfire. And with that in mind, I would love to hear what you come up with. And wouldn't it be brilliant once this is all over and people are allowed to start not social distancing anymore? Wouldn't it be brilliant to all meet around the campfire and have a little ghost story night? That'd be awesome. Hopefully that's something we can manage in the not too distant future. So let's take a look at the basic plots now anyway. As I said, there are 3 of them. You don't need to make any notes as I'm talking through this video, because as always, just down there you'll find a link. And in that link are the bullet points for all 3 of the plots. So don't worry about writing. Just listen, think about it as we go through. Here we go then. Right, plot 1. Our narrator is on a journey somewhere, in a car, or possibly if you're going olden days, horse and carriage even, something like that. Totally fine, doesn't matter. But they're on a journey, they're going somewhere. As they're going there, they see a hitchhiker on the side of the road, a traveller trying to complete their own journey. And because it wouldn't make much of a story if they just drove on by, they of course will stop and pick them up. They let them in the car, they have a nice chat on their way to where they're going, and everything seems fine. Maybe there's the occasional jarring moment of that's a slightly odd thing to say, or what an old-fashioned way to talk. Or just something that doesn't quite seem to fit right to the narrator. But other than that, everything progresses nicely until they get where they're going. The traveller then leaves the car, goes, up the gate or down the path or even straight into the house. And once they've gone, the narrator looks down onto the car seat and realises, oh, they've left their hat, coat, gloves, scarf, whatever it is, doesn't matter. They've left the item, I better just go and take it into them now. So they pick it up off the passenger seat, go in, through the gate, whatever it was, round the path, into the house. They knock on the door and somebody totally different answers. And as soon as they see that hat or coat or whatever it was you chose, their face drops. Perhaps they even begin to cry. And your narrator just doesn't understand why. What's going on? Why is this happening? And it's only at that point that crying person in the house realises or lets your narrator know that the person they've just shared a car with died all those years ago. And this was always their favourite coat, whatever it was. And they've just delivered it back. The person in the car was dead all along. Something like that. And there's plenty you can play with that story structure, isn't there? And we'll come up to some of those choices a little bit later. So that's the basic one. Plot number 1, the traveller. Plot number 2 then. The unaware. Our narrator is facing great danger or peril. Perhaps they're in a burning building and the fire and the flames and the smoke is beginning to choke and engulf them. Or they're out stuck at sea in the middle of a terrible storm. Their boat's being tossed from side to side, the crashing waves, all of this kind of stuff, and they're thrown from the boat. Or maybe they step out into the road in front of some oncoming traffic. Who knows? Some great peril. A factory roof collapsing. Could be anything. Just as they are about to meet their doom, they black out. Well, when they come back around again, everything's calmed down. The fire's put out, the storm has finished, whatever it is. The road's now deserted, or they pick their way out of the rubble from the factory. Whatever your peril was, that's what they're going to do. They're going to come around. Oh, I can't believe I'm alive. Thank you for saving me. Oh, amazing. However I survived this thing, I can't believe it. I've hardly got a scratch on me even. They make their way home or to the nearest house or anything like that, feeling super lucky to still be alive. And as they go into that house, they find, oh, is that Mum? She's crying. What's she crying for? And no matter what they say, she's completely inconsolable. In fact, after a while, the narrator starts to realise they're not actually really responding to anything they say. And it's only then when they catch a little eye shot in the mirror, they realise they are leaving no reflection. In fact, they can't be seen in the mirror at all. They died all along. The narrator is the ghost in this story, The Unaware. So finally, plot number 3, which we will call The Mark. In this story, the narrator is with a companion. They're travelling somewhere and all is going well until they encounter a stranger, either coming the other way or catching up behind them. Everything seems fine at first, but the closer the stranger gets, the more the companion starts to feel uneasy and warns you, don't look at them. I've just got a really bad feeling at this, don't look. And as the stranger passes or overtakes or whatever it is, like, just keep looking ahead, don't look at them, don't look at them. The companion is terrified, but the narrator just can't help themselves. So the narrator does stop and look at the stranger. They feel their entire existence being frozen from within inside them by this awesome creature's terrible powers, this ghost's evil, ice-cold glare. Instantly, the narrator's hair turns white, or their face twists into an expression of terror, or, I don't know, they lose the power to speak, or whatever it is. Or perhaps as they walk by the stranger has grabbed their arm like this and has left some sort of ghostly mark upon their skin. Whatever at this instant change that it reflects the terror is permanent and has left a permanent mark on the narrator, who should have listened to their companion when they said, don't look. But she didn't, he didn't, whoever it was, the narrator didn't, and now is stuck with this mark of terror forever. And that's plot number 3. So as I said earlier, if you look down there, you will find a link to a document which will help you plan and write your story. As well as the 3 plots which I've just outlined for you, you will find some questions to think about. Now, they're generic, which means they're general for all of the 3 different plots. Some of the questions will be more or less relevant in some of the stories, but generally all of it is worth just considering for a moment. You don't need to make any extensive kind of notes, but you should have an idea in your mind of where you're going with this story. Now, the planning points that are considered are things around the setting. Where does it happen? Is it in a forest? Is it a road through a forest? Is it along the coast on the beach? Is it a stormy day? Woodland, coast, desert, town? Who knows? What time of day is it? Most of you will probably opt for the evening or the night, maybe the very early morning before the sun has risen. But equally, you could have a really effective ghost story in the bright sunshine of day, as long as the place is deserted enough and isolated enough. Does it occur in the modern day? Or is your story back, I don't know, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago? It could be any of those things. Just choose a setting for your story to make sense, but make sure that you avoid any of those anachronisms. That means if it's set 200 years ago, your narrator ain't driving a car. Right, characters is the next thing to consider. Are they male, female? Are they young, old? What are their personality traits? Are they courageous or anxious and nervous? Are they foolish? Do they take their time? Are they thoughtful? How can you show those feelings without directly telling them? Because remember, show not tell is really important in narrative writing. Why are these characters out and about? Where are they going? Why are they going there? Where are they travelling to? Where have they come from? Is there something a little bit strange about the ghostly character which is instantly recognisable as a bit ghostly? Or is it going to be the reveal later when there was actually nothing to suggest that this was a ghostly character at all? What is it that just doesn't seem quite right about them, maybe? And finally, your grammatical choices, your stylistic choices. Are you going in the first person? I did this, I did that, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Or the third person, he, she, Eric, whatever it is, was doing those things. Also, you're going to need to choose whether you're writing in the past tense or the present tense. Has it happened? Is it happening? Now, I would suggest that the vast majority of ghost stories are told from the first person perspective. It happened to me. In the past tense, it happened to me. That's the most common way of telling a ghost story. It's probably the most natural way that you will find of writing it when it comes to that. But those are the key questions you're going to need to consider when it comes to writing your story. So now I've given you the 3 basic plots. Choose one, get a bit of planning done. Once that's done, come back to this video and we'll start model writing. And just so you know, the model I'm going to produce in this video is going to be on story 3, The Mark. And I'm only really going to talk about the introduction of setting the scene and the scenery. But just in case you're the kind of person who really struggles to get started, if you are that kind of person, I suggest choosing number 3, because that's the one I'm about to model for you. You can even watch the model first before you do your planning if you want to just piggyback onto my ideas. Not a problem at all. So, I'll see you in a moment. Right, well, as you can see from the screen there, I've set up a header for my story called The Fisherman, because I've chosen for my story to have 2 sort of grumpy fishermen. I'm doing the Mark, so I need 2 of them, of course. Because I want to set this sort of feeling of foreboding and terrible stuff, I'm going to start with a tiny bit of description about the place itself. So let's go with a thin sliver of moonlight. That's quite a nice expressive phrase. A thin sliver of it broke through the thick fog. Thick fog, yeah, okay. No, battled through. I want it to make it seem more like the light and the dark are in a battle here, because that's what sets up the tone for next time. A thin sliver of moonlight battled through the thick fog, which had descended upon the small coastal village. Okay, so I've set that time thing. We're in a small coastal village, and there's a bit of light, but mostly it's fog. Let's go to the harbour. Down in the harbour, because ultimately that's where my story is going to be set. Crashing waves thundered into the small wooden fishing boats, rocking and drenching them in salty foam. No, let's have freezing salty foam, shall we? Freezing salty foam. I want to make it seem like a thoroughly unpleasant place to go. Seems good to me. Should we do a bit? Should we have a light? Let's have a lighthouse. It's a classic sort of feel, isn't it? On the cliff top, up on the cliff top, the old lighthouse kept its lonely watch over the treacherous rocks of what should we call this place? Do you know what? I like the Lizard Point down in Cornwall, so I'm going to go with Lizard Bay. It's not necessarily set there, but just because I like that place, we'll have Lizard in there. That seems good enough to me. No, do you know what? Let's go even further. Those rocks had claimed the lives of many men over the years. Okay, because I want to set up that this is a dangerous kind of place. Which sort of men? Men foolish or desperate enough. Excuse my terrible typing. Or desperate enough to head out into the storm. Oh, head out into the black unknown, even better. Head out into the black unknown, only to be devoured by the storm. Venture instead of head would be an improvement, I think. Devoured by the storm. So I've sort of set the scene there quite nicely in a few sentences and given some clues of what's going to happen. So now I want to have one of my characters talking.
Because I don't want to say there was a fisherman and he talked to his friend, so let's just launch into it, shall we? Looks bad out. Probably setting up the idea that he's a man of very few words, and so's his mate. Alright. The two figures, what do you reckon, slowly made their way across, picked their way across, picked their way across the pebbled shore. Their heavy boots, they'd be crunching along that, wouldn't they? Their heavy boots crunching and skittling the stones ahead. Ahead of them. Over their shoulders, what should we have over their shoulders? Was draped a thick, faded orange net. I reckon you guys probably seen some of those at the seashore before. That kind of, it's going to be sort of damaged, isn't it? Frayed, probably, if it's rope, frayed and split. Just in case our readers don't know what frayed is, that kind of gives them a clue. Through years of heavy use. Just from that little description, we now know quite a bit about our characters. We know they've been there for quite some time, otherwise they wouldn't have this bulky net. But let's lay it on a bit even thicker. Despite its weight, they carried it as if it were nothing. Along with even more stuff, bulky boxes filled with equipment. That's it. I don't actually know the names of too much fishing equipment, so we'll just go with equipment, shall we? Let's have our characters again. Reckon we'll be fine once we're out the bay. He's an optimist, obviously, even though he's seen that terrible weather outside. So just make sure you check in on the speech punctuation there as well. Remember that the final piece always comes inside the inverted comma. So all my full stops are within those inverted commas marking the speech. Now, the other guy before responded with I, so let's have him do it again, shall we? I reckon we will. He's a man of even fewer words. The first guy. So we've sort of got a brief introduction to them. Let's go a little further. They continued on their way, only occasionally muttering to each other. That's kind of what they're doing, isn't it? They're not exactly talking, not chatting very much. Above them, the clouds rolled in from the sea, forming a dark black blanket overhead. The moon's dim light, we mentioned it earlier right at the start, that thin sliver, so the moon's dim light disappeared from view, so now we're almost in complete pitch blackness. So the taller figure, who let's assume is the first one, the taller figure took out an old, what was it called? Paraffin, that's it, that's the stuff. Paraffin lamp. And fumbled inside his waxy pockets. He's wearing a big thick overall that keeps him nice and dry, to find a match. Notice there that I'm using a paraffin lamp and a match, and earlier we had these wooden boats, small wooden fishing boats. Nothing to suggest at the moment there's a modern day story, is there? So let's have him striking him. He struck it, lit the lamp, and I want to show that he's quite a hardened character. So I'm going to have him pinching the match, and pinched the match between his fingertips. That would be quite painful at the end, feeling the intense heat eating at his skin. Why is he doing that, I wonder? Well, who knows? When the pain became too much, he grimaced and flicked the flaming stick down onto the stones. I don't think it would be flaming, actually, would it, still, if he's done that? So it's more like a smoking, blackened, flick the blackened stick down onto the stones. Pretty neat so far. I've set the scene. I've shown a bit of characterization here with my fisherman. They don't talk much. They've got very old equipment. One of them is a kind of sturdy, hardy fellow who doesn't mind a bit of pain. So you get the sense, they're not scared of the storm. They've seen it. They've done it all before. And maybe that's actually what's going to set them up badly for the rest of the time, because actually they are now going to be endangering themselves almost with the way that they treat the sea and the surroundings around them. So that should be enough to get you going. In a bit of time I might carry on the story a little bit. If I do, I'll include it as another link in the description below, just in that Dropbox, for you to have a little read at before you get going with yours. I may not carry on, but if I get a chance, I will. So that's enough to get you started, hopefully. I chose a fisherman in a village setting. You might prefer something you're much more familiar with. Whatever works for you, but maybe just give it a little bit of description of what the place is like at the start. Suggest a bit of danger. Introduce your characters through a tiny bit of chat. Show a little bit about them, what they do. Set the scene. And that should get you going for now.
So, you've got your plot, you've got your plan, you've planned your characters, your setting, and you've seen my modelled example. Now is the time for you to get writing. Whatever you do, just like last week, watch out for ghosts. See you soon.